All right, so get this. We're diving deep into the 2024 election, and oh boy, it is a nail-biter. I know you've probably got a million things going on, but trust me, this is worth a few minutes of your time. We're talking about a race so close, it could come down to just a handful of votes.
Absolutely. This race between Kamala Harris and Donald Trump, it's neck and neck. It really shows you how divided the country is right now.
Yeah, for sure. Okay, so anyone who needs a super quick reminder, the Electoral College, 270, that's the magic number to win the White House. And right now, neither candidate has hit that number yet. Harris is sitting at 219 electoral votes, while Trump is just slightly ahead at 266.
And this is where things get really interesting. See, it's not just about the popular vote, though that is super close too. It's about winning the right states, the states that will give you those electoral votes.
Okay, lay it on us. What are the numbers looking like? Give us the breakdown. Where does each candidate stand right now?
All right, so Harris is currently at 47.3% of the popular vote, which is a huge number of votes, 64,558,774 votes. But Trump is edging her out, 51.1%, with 69,807,808 votes.
So even though Harris has, what, millions of votes? Because of the system, she could still lose. That's kind of crazy.
Yeah, that's the Electoral College for you. And that's why these next few states we're going to talk about, they're super important, absolutely crucial.
Hit us with it then, the battleground breakdown. Which states are still up in the air? What's the situation on the ground?
Okay, so we've got 5 states that are keeping everyone on the edge of their seats. Wisconsin, Nevada, Michigan, New Hampshire, and Arizona. Each one of these has a significant chunk of electoral votes, enough to swing the entire election.
All right, let's take them one by one. First up, Wisconsin. Land of cheese and apparently a whole lot of electoral drama. What's the latest there?
Okay, so right now, Trump is in the lead with 50.9%, Harris at 47.5%. But, and here's the thing, 96% of the votes are in. We're talking about a really, really small margin of votes that could still flip the whole thing.
Oh, wow. That is close. Sounds like Wisconsin could flip it any second. Okay, what about Nevada? It feels like they've been counting those votes forever.
I know. It's been a total roller coaster. As it stands, Trump is holding on to the lead there too, 51.4%. Harris is at 46.9%, and they've counted 93% of the votes. Again, it is super, super close. Every vote matters.
Okay, next up, Michigan. And I know this one's a biggie. 15 electoral votes are up for grabs there. What's the deal?
Trump's ahead in Michigan too, currently at 51.1%. Harris at 47.1%. But, and this is important, they've only counted 88% of the votes. So there's still a lot of ballots out there, plenty that could shift things.
All right, so Michigan is one to watch. Now, New Hampshire is looking kind of different, right? Leaning blue, if I'm not mistaken.
You are right. New Hampshire is the only one out of those key battleground states where Harris is actually in lead, 51.4%, Trump at 47.6%. But they've only counted 84% of the votes, so things could still very easily change.
And last but not least, Arizona, which feels like it's moving at a snail's pace when it comes to counting.
It is agonizing, right? Right now, Trump has a slim lead, 50.8%, Harris at 48.3%, but they've only counted 55% of the votes. So Arizona is like the wild card in this whole thing. It could go either way depending on those remaining votes.
Sounds like every single vote in these states really does matter. It's like watching a political thriller play out in real time.
It really is. And just to give you an idea how close this is, you've got Wisconsin and Nevada. They've counted 96%, 93% of the votes, respectively. And we are talking about a handful of ballots potentially making all the difference.
That's insane. And we haven't even mentioned the states that are already leaning one way or another.
Right. And we should probably mention those. Even though they don't guarantee a win for either candidate yet, Georgia is projected to go to Trump, and he's currently leading in North Carolina and Pennsylvania as well.
So even with all those states, Trump still doesn't have enough to win. Talk about suspense. And speaking of interesting things, I was super intrigued to see that Nebraska's 2nd congressional district actually went to Harris. It's not that often you see Nebraska splitting its electoral votes.
Definitely unusual. It just goes to show, even within states that are traditionally red, there's a lot of diversity in how people are voting.
Yeah, it's a reminder that every vote matters, every corner of the country. Okay, before we move on from the presidential race, let's touch on early voting. Over 82 million people voted early this year, which is just mind-blowing.
It is. Really shows you how engaged people are. And when you break down those early votes by party, 41% came from Democrats, 39% from Republicans. Get this, 20%, a whole 20% from people who marked other affiliations.
Wow. Okay, that 20% from other affiliations, that's really interesting. What do you think that says about independent voters this year? Are they the key to all of this?
It's hard to say for sure, but it definitely suggests that a big chunk of voters aren't fully aligning with either party. They could be swing voters still making up their minds, or, new voters just entering the political scene. Maybe even people who are just over the two-party system altogether.
So it's like a giant question mark hanging over this election. Will those independent voters swing one way or the other? Or will they split? Makes it even harder to predict the outcome, and that's saying something. All right, so we know this election is like crazy close and every vote really does matter, but it's not just about who sits in the Oval Office, right? There's some pretty big issues that will kind of affect everyone no matter who wins.
Oh, for sure, for sure. This election, it's about way more than just the presidential race. There are some major decisions happening. Yeah. Things like abortion rights, Senate control, even who gets to vote.
Yeah, and it feels like these issues are like really front and center, more than we've seen maybe in a while. So let's dive into some of these hot button issues, starting with, I guess, abortion rights. We talked about Arizona and Missouri both, kind of expanding abortion rights, but in very different ways. What do you make of those outcomes?
Well, it is really interesting to see how these issues are playing out. At the state level, I mean. Because it's not as easy as like a red state versus blue state thing anymore. In Arizona, voters actually chose to, enshrine abortion rights in their state constitution. And that, I think, shows a real push to protect reproductive health care, even in states that maybe lean conservative on other issues.
And then you have Missouri, which also expanded abortion rights, but through a totally different ballot measure. What does that tell us about how people are feeling there, I mean?
It just shows how complicated this issue really is. Even within one state, you've got these different viewpoints, different strategies for how to deal with, like abortion access. It reminds you these aren't just political debates. They have real consequences for real people.
For sure, for sure. And I imagine these state-level decisions can, ripple outward, influence other states, potentially.
Oh, absolutely, yeah. It's very possible that what happened in Arizona, what happened in Missouri, that it could spark similar movements in other states, either to restrict or protect abortion rights. So it's going to be really interesting to see how this plays out over the next, few years.
Okay, so we're seeing some kind of nuance, some state-specific approaches on this abortion issue. Let's shift gears a bit, talk about the projected power shift in the Senate. NBC News is saying Republicans are likely to gain control, but what does that even mean for, everyday people? Break it down for us.
Well, so a Republican-controlled Senate, that could have a big impact on, a lot of things. The laws that get passed, the judges that are appointed, even, the overall direction of the country. Think of it this way. A Republican Senate might be more likely to pass laws that, align with conservative priorities. Could make it easier for, say, a Republican president to get their judicial nominees confirmed.
So potentially a huge shift in the balance of power, right, in Washington? But it's not a guaranteed thing, is it, for Republicans, I mean?
Not at all. Even if they have the majority. The Senate still needs to compromise to actually get things done. Remember, just one senator can hold up a whole piece of legislation. And there's usually some division within parties.
Yeah.
Which can make things complicated.
Right. They don't all just vote the same way every time. So we can't assume a Republican Senate equals, a specific agenda getting through.
Exactly. And it's important to remember, this is still just a projection. We have to see how these final Senate races actually turn out to know for sure what the next Senate will look like.
Okay, so Senate control is kind of a bit of a mystery still. Now, what about these measures we're seeing that prohibit non-citizen voting? Those passed in, 8 states? And they seem to be gaining traction all over the country. What do you think is behind this trend? And what are the sort of potential consequences?
It's a tough issue, really complicated, and it goes way back. Some argue that these measures are, crucial to protect the integrity of our elections. Make sure that only citizens are the ones deciding who represents them. There are concerns about voter fraud, about non-citizens influencing election outcomes.
Well, there is another side to all of this, right?
Yes. Oh, yeah, for sure. Others see this as voter suppression, targeting immigrant communities. They say it undermines the whole idea of democracy. Their argument is that, non-citizens contribute to our communities. They pay taxes, they work, raise families. They should have a say in how their communities are run.
So it all boils down to who belongs, who has the right to participate. And that is not an easy question to answer.
No, it's not. And it brings up a lot of important questions. About citizenship, about belonging, about what it means to be part of this country. Moving forward, we really need to think about what these measures will mean in the long run for voter participation, for representation. It's something we should all be thinking about.
Okay, so we've covered a lot. abortion rights, Senate control, voting access, big issues. And they're going to be debated probably long after this election is over. It really is about what kind of country we want to be.
It is. And it's up to all of us to, stay informed, engage in these conversations, really try to see things from different perspectives.
Yeah, it's easy to get caught up in like the horse race of it all, who's ahead, who's behind. But these issues, these are the things that'll really shape our society, decide our future.
Such an important point.
Yeah.
This election isn't just about picking a president. It's about choosing the direction our country will take for years to come.
All right, welcome back to the deep dive. So we've, gone through all the numbers, looked at those battleground states, talked about the big issues. But now I kind of want to step back, look at the bigger picture here.
Yeah, good idea. Let's think about what all of this tells us about American politics, like where are we headed?
Okay, so what are your thoughts?
Well, one thing we can't ignore, right, is how divided things are.
Yeah.
This super tight race, those split decisions we talked about, it really shows you that we, as a country, we're struggling to, define what our values are, what our priorities are.
Like two different versions of America, each with their own idea of what the future should look like. And it feels like those two visions are like clashing hard.
Right, exactly. So then it becomes, well, how do you bridge that gap? How do you find common ground? How do we all move forward together? It's a challenge, that's for sure.
Yeah, I mean, at the end of the day, we are all sharing this country, whether we see eye to eye on everything or not.
For sure. I think this election, it's a bit of a wake-up call for our leaders.
Yeah.
They need to figure out how to address the concerns of everyone, not just the people who voted for them. It's about governing for the whole country, not just like a part of it.
Yeah, it's not just about winning. It's about what you do after you win. It's about finding solutions that actually work for everybody.
Right, and that takes, well, a lot, actually. You have to listen, you have to compromise, you have to actually see things from other people's point of view, putting the country first, above politics.
Okay, so division, that's one big thing that stands out from this election. What else, when you kind of zoom out? What else strikes you?
I think we're seeing how people engage in politics changing.
Yeah.
I mean, record early voting numbers, all that debate happening online. It tells me that people are, more invested than ever in deciding what the future is going to look like. They're not just sitting back and watching anymore.
Yeah, totally. It feels like people are realizing their voices actually matter, that they can actually make a difference. And that's, empowering.
It is. Because democracy, it only works if we participate. It's not like a spectator sport. We all need to be involved.
Right. It's not just about voting every 4 years. It's about staying informed, staying engaged, holding our leaders accountable. It's a constant thing.
It is. And I think this election could be a turning point, a moment where we actually reinvigorate our democracy, really commit to being engaged, a chance to come together, decide what kind of future we want for ourselves, for our kids and grandkids.
So amidst all this division, all this uncertainty, there's also a little bit of hope. Like people are ready to get to work, get involved. It's kind of inspiring, honestly.
I think so. And that's something to be optimistic about no matter who ends up winning. It's a sign that, our democracy is still alive and kicking. People still care about this country.
Well said. So where do we go from here? What should our listeners be thinking about while we wait for these final results and, start this next chapter?
Stay engaged. Don't just, let the election be over and forget about it. Keep learning, keep asking questions, keep talking to people, even when you don't agree with them.
That's great advice. Don't tune out. Stay informed, stay involved, and hold those leaders accountable. Doesn't matter who they are.
You got it. This is your democracy.
Yeah.
The future of the country, it's in your hands.
Well, Deep Divers, that's it for our deep dive into the 2024 election. It's been wild. We're still waiting on that final result, but one thing is clear, American politics, well, it's at a crossroads. We've got some tough stuff to deal with, but we also have a real chance right now to build a better future for everyone. Thanks for joining us on the deep dive, and stay curious out there.